Okay, good morning, late morning, early afternoon.
Well, it is
We
actually still morning in California.
That's true. Okay, we have a lot of students coming in. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Okay, we'll get started in just a minute, but while we're waiting for everybody else to join in, I'm going to remind you that after Ava's talk, you'll have the opportunity to type in some questions in the Q&A box, and Ava will answer as many questions as possible. But
Are you gonna are you gonna repeat the questions, or I will just
yes,
read the questions?
Ava,
Oh, okay.
after you speak, I will read the questions for
Okay,
you.
okay,
And
okay.
remember, we'll aim for like 45 minutes and then the last 15 minutes for
Whatever,
questions.
whatever.
Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, welcome to this talk from Holocaust Museum, Los Angeles. For those of you who have not been to our museum before, you can see it behind me in my virtual background. Of course, I'm not here, the museum's closed, but we have our virtual programs every day, including this one. So this morning, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Eva Nathanson, a Holocaust survivor from Hungary, who will share her story with you. And as I mentioned afterwards, you can type in questions in the Q&A box, and she will answer as many as possible. So Eva, thank you so much for being with us this morning. And you can't see everyone, but they're all giving you a virtual applause. Thank you.
Am I on now, or should I wait?
Yes, you can start now.
Okay. As Michael so eloquently introduced me, I am Eva Nathanson. I was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1941 into the upper class Jewish family. My grandfather owned land. She had the largest kosher dairy farm in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. And my birth father was a cabinet maker. He had a little factory in Budapest. And by the time I was born in 1941, my father was taken into the Hungarian army. But as a Jew, he was part of the workforce, the slave labor, not the army itself. And so I spent most of my time as an early childhood with my governess at my mother's father's house at the estate, because my mother was running my father's factory. In 1942, end of 1942, beginning of 1943, my grandparents were given up by somebody, because my grandfather was working with the underground, and he had smuggled Jews out of Czechoslovakia and Poland, brought them onto the estate, and when they found a place for them to go, they sent them, and somebody turned him in for that. And so in end of 1942, beginning of 1943, I don't know exactly the date, my entire family was picked up and taken away, and we never seen them again. At that point, my governess smuggled me back to Budapest to my mother. And after that, I stayed with my mom in Budapest, but because the Nazis wanted to make an example out of the entire family, so my mother and I were also on the list to be picked up. So the underground started to hide us. So I spent the next 2.5 years basically hidden all over Budapest. By this time, my father was already murdered because he escaped to visit me on my first birthday. He got me this doll, which is here. And the reason I'm showing this doll, because that was the only thing I had as a small child for the rest of, during the time we were hiding. That was my best thing and my most valued item. And also that was my richness. We were hidden in cellars, attics, bombed down buildings later on, closets. I was even put once into a chest of drawer because I was so small. So that's where I spent some of the time in. I also, some people had dug holes in their, in some place in the room and covered that with plywood, and we were underneath that. After about 6 to 8 weeks, or sometimes a few months, the people who were hiding us worried that they're going to be into trouble if somebody finds out they're hiding a couple of Jews. So we were always moved, and we were always moved at night. I remember but I was being, most of the time I was being carried and my mouth was taped to make sure that I won't make any noise when we were taken from one place to the other. And a couple of times when we were taken to one place to the other toward the end of the war, my mother and I were smuggled to one place to the other. We were actually caught. And once they caught us and put us on a truck because they were going to take us to a train station. By that time, they were deporting Hungarians. And we also had a young girl staying with us. Her name was Valley, because her parents were taken away, and the underground found her sitting on the street crying. So they had given her to my mother. So there was 3 of us. And I remember sneaking through one alley to the other to get to the place where we were hidden, and the Nazis found us and they put us on trucks. They separated the adults from the children, and they put my mother on one truck and my little friend and I on the other truck. I remember this was the first time I was away from my mother since I was like 1.5 years or 2. And during the only time we were always hidden, so there was nobody else around us. And I remember being petrified. I felt my stomach churning and in pain from fear. And then all of a sudden, I looked out on the bottom of the truck. They had those wooden slots, and the lowest where I could look through, and I saw there were 4 men in SS uniform following the truck. And by this time, anybody in a uniform scared me. And especially if they had the swastika on them, because my short life, it was always caused problem. So I grabbed my little friend's hand and tried to hide in the truck. But then 2 of the men got off the horses and climbed on the truck and dragged us. I'm going to close the door because they are doing construction in a So 2 of the men climbed up the truck, and they were going through the children's faces. And when they got to us, they each of them grabbed one of us and threw us over the side of the truck into the arm of the 2 other SS on the horseback. I remember I was so scared that I totally lost it. And I threw up, and I also sold myself. And I remember I wanted to die. I felt that I was, I was such a shame for doing this. But these people, the 2 men didn't pay any attention to me. I was crying and sobbing. They didn't even say a word to me. They were riding with the horses, and all of a sudden we got to a house. They got off the horses and took me off the horse and my friend, and there was my mother. Apparently these 4 men were not the they were not Nazis, they were underground, dressed as a horse, as the Nazis. And so my mother and I were reunited, and we were taken to another place to hide. It was in a cellar. And I remember before we were taken to the cellar, I was in such a dirty mess that these nice people who were hitting us decided to give me a bath in a little wooden tub. And this was the first time I had a bath for like a year and a half or something. I remember the incredible feeling of the water washing all the dirt of the year and a half of hiding, because until then, my mother just washed us with a washcloth if she could. And I remember feeling that it couldn't be anything better. And they also gave us a glass of something warm to drink. And so today, many years later, if anything hurts me, I take a bath and drink something warm because it makes me feel better. I think reminds me of when I was a kid. Then we went into the hiding in the cellar. The only thing is that in this cellar, beside us, there were a lot of rodents and bugs and stuff like that. And I remember these animals looking at us and making these funny noises. And I was petrified during the entire time. By this time, I also had developed malnutrition and some kind of weird disease. I was running a fever all the time. I very rarely could keep food down, and I was just really very sick. And of course, there was no such a thing as seeing a doctor or anything like that. So we were there for a while, and then we had to leave from that house. Then they took us someplace else where we were hidden in somebody else's room. There was a whole dog, and it was covered with some kind of material. And the top of it, they put plywood with holes so we could breathe, and tables and chairs on top of us. So we were not allowed to come out of there until it was quiet and until we were told. So basically spent most of the time lying curled up in some kind of position. I was not allowed to ever speak anything or make any noises. The food, but the money, when we were first taken into hiding, my mother grabbed all the little valuables she could have to pay for the people who were hiding us, but that money ran out very quickly. So what she did, she was an excellent knitter. So what she did is she was knitting day and night, and whatever she was knitting, they sold, and that's how they gave us the food. So if they were able to sell something in the black market, we ate. Otherwise, we just got very little food during the entire time. So that was one of the reasons I was being so sick. 1945, when the Allies had got into the war, the Hungarians knew that it is just a matter of time before the Nazis gonna be beaten. So they searched all the houses in Budapest, and if they found anybody hiding, they had taken them to the Danube, tied 2 to 3 people together, and shot them into the Danube, where the water was running at the fastest. I remember being carried by my mom because I was too sick to able to walk. And I remember we were at the end of the line, and it was sometimes in the February or March of 1945. It was still very cold, and I remember shivering because we were not dressed for the outing by the Danube. And there were a lot of people standing on the line, and then they tied 2 or 3 people together. Then they fired and shot one of them only because they were not going to waste any extra bullets on Jews. So one person was dead and dragged the other 2 down, and you could hear the begging, the pleading, the gurgling. My mother told us to cover our eyes and our ears so we won't hear and see anything, but I never followed the instructions well, so I looked. I remember every few minutes, when after somebody was shot into the Danube, we moved up a few steps, and we moved up a few steps, and it was getting to be late already. By 4 or 5 o'clock, it was getting to be pretty dark. And we were front of the line, and the Nazi was wrapping the rope around our bodies, my mother and my little friend and I was so short that I only hit to my mother's, a little bit over her knees. And all of a sudden I heard this man turning to my mom and saying, "You dirty Jew, I know who you are. You lived in the same apartment as I did before the war. And I will need somebody to testify that I saved the Jew. If you promise to testify for me if I need it, I will not shoot you and the brats to kill, just to wound." And my mom said, "Of course I agree. And you will find me and I will testify." So what I remember, the three of us were dragged for several feet. And then I heard the fire the gun being fired. And I remember falling into the Danube. But instead of falling into the water where the water was moving the fastest, we were shot into sort of a cove where there were some other, there were tree roots and some other things growing. And I remember the water was not that deep. And my mother was trying to wriggle around so our faces will not be in the water. I remember it was so cold that I could feel, first I couldn't feel my feet and my legs and my arms, and I was feeling totally numb. I wasn't sure at that point if I was alive or dead. And then somebody came and pulled us out of the water after a while. And remember, they cut the rope, they gave us something to cover ourselves up, and they took us someplace else, and that was the last place we went to hide. And when we got to these people's houses, they were very kind, and they gave all of us this time a wash. I remember sitting the second time in the entire Holocaust in a little wooden bathtub and being washed, and they gave us some warm tea, or it was milk, something warm to drink. And we were told that we need to be put into a room someplace until the liberation. And we were taken into an apartment where they had, one room was full of people. And this is the first time I was hidden with others. They were mainly old people because the young were either taken away or killed. There were no other children. There was you could smell the old people's unwashed bodies, the smell of fear. People were huddling in corners and sleeping on the floor. There were no blankets or pillows. And my mother found a little corner for the three of us to be. And we were there for several days. We were fed once a day. They gave us something warm to drink and a piece of bread. And my mother always gave the two of us as much as she could because she were afraid that we will not survive from hunger. By this time, she lost an awful, she looked like a skeleton herself. And we were that way for several days. And at one point, one morning, and my sleep was very disturbed all the time. I was having nightmares. I also was afraid so much that every sound would wake me up. And I remember one morning the door opened up and there were two men at the doorway with the man of the house, and the two men was wearing uniforms. And I remember that the uniform was not black, it was khaki, and they had a hat on with a little red strip on the front and a star. But they had guns on their shoulders and they were wearing uniforms. So I became frightened and I started to whimper. And my mother put her arms out because she knew that these were the liberating forces of Soviet Union. And so to calm me down, she didn't want me to be hysterically crying. And as she did that, the two soldiers realized that there was two kids in the corner. And one of them came to us, and I remember seeing the boots and the pants, and then a hand going to a pocket. And by this time I was almost hysterical because I thought that it is a gun which is coming out of the pocket. And he took something out, broke it into half, and shoved it into our mouth. It was a piece of chocolate. And I remember I had never tasted anything so delicious in my life. I am 79 years old now, and I still, every single thing goes wrong in my life, I buy dark chocolate. That's what I live on almost sometimes when things are bad, because to me it always means that the is a liberation from all the pain and hurt. Anyhow, we were told that time that Budapest is being liberated and that within a few days we will be able to leave. But until then, we should not go onto the street because there is house-to-house fighting with the Nazis. And the first time I remember that this man walked to the windows and pulled down the shades, the dark shades which put up there, so nobody knew that there were people hiding in that room. And I remember the sunlight hitting my face and my eyes. This was the first time I seen sunlight for 2 years or so, because each time we were moving someplace, it was at night. And first it was very painful to see all this light in my eyes. And all of a sudden I remember seeing the faces in the sunlight, and I thought it was a miracle. I haven't seen anything so beautiful. And every single day from that day on, we were allowed to go out to the yard for a half an hour by the groups we were in. And I remember sitting on the sunlight and feeling the sun actually warming and healing my body. And at one point we were told that the Budapest was won by the Russians and that Hungary was liberated and that we can go anywhere we wanted to go. My mom and I went to my grandfather's estate because she thought that if anybody survived the Holocaust, then they will come to there. My little friend was adopted by one of the underground people who had hid us arranged for us hiding all this time, because he did not have any children. And he was the one who found this little girl on the street in the first place. And he felt that he needed to adopt her. So she was adopted. But she and I became very close, and we've seen each other all my childhood. My mom and I went to the estate. The main building where my grandfather's house was taken over by the liberating forces of the Soviet Union. So we ended up staying in the home of the governess who originally saved my life. And when they had taken everybody away from the household. And we were staying there for a few days. And then my mother received a letter from Budapest. And that came from the man who was my birth father's best friend. And he told my mom that the two men had promised each other that whoever will survive will make sure that the other person's family is going to be okay. And he promised to him that he will take care of me and my mom. So my mom went to meet him, and the two of them decided that they get married, and I was going to be adopted. So about a week later, she came with this man to the village, and she introduced him as my father. And I remember thinking that it was a miracle, because I never even knew that I had a father until then. I had no recollection of my birth father. I was a year old last time I saw him. And he also had a box with him. And he said to me, he heard that the doll which I got before the war, it was all in bad shape already, and that it was dirty and full of bugs. And so he wanted me to have something new. And he got me a little doll which was made out of cellulose. And I remember looking at this new doll, and all of a sudden the doll, which was everything to me, disappeared, and I never seen it again. The new doll was never the same to me. It just became a toy. It has never been so close to me, because the other doll had never left my hand for 2.5 years. We went back to Budapest. I was very, very sick. I had malnutrition and some kind of other weird disease. I spent several months in different hospitals and nobody could figure out what was wrong with me really. And then I was discharged, lived with my mother and my stepfather in Budapest, because he was a master craftsman in wood. And I went to elementary school, junior high, and part of high school in Budapest. I was an excellent student, but not a popular kid. I was the only Jewish girl left in the entire school of about 1,000. I didn't act like anybody. I didn't look like anybody. I was very sickly and weak, and in one way overprotected, and was not very popular. Plus, my parents were really afraid to send me to somebody's house to play in case if those people were Nazis and they would say anything to me which I shouldn't hear. Also, because of the fact that my stepfather adopted me, they didn't want me to know that he was my stepfather and not my real father. They figured that I don't have to deal with that as well. So they were afraid that somebody would inform me about that. I have something I was born with, which is called dyslexia. And that was the only issue with my going to school, because my writing was always a mess. I mixed up letters and numbers. So I taught myself how to memorize everything so I don't have to take notes. And I was able to word to word recite what the teachers would tell you a day before. And they discovered that, so they didn't want me to learn from other kids. So every single day I had to stand up before class started and recite the homework, which gave me a good grade, but also made me very unpopular because it looked like I was showing off. In 1956, the Hungarian Revolution broke out. It lasted about 3 months. My father sent me to Budapest to find those people who were working in the underground and they saved my life, because by this time they became very much into the part of the communistic party and a communistic regime. And he felt that since they saved my life, we need to save theirs. And so we hid 3 or 4 people in our house for the duration of the revolution. In December 1956, when the Hungarian Revolution was beaten, there were 2 tanks in front of our house, and they said that anybody who will make any movement will be shot. My father, my 2 half-sisters, and my mom and I packed an overnight bag, and we went to Austria. We escaped to Austria. It took us 6 hours when we got off the train by the border to going to get to Austria in the snow. The snow was up to our chest as we were going through. Then we spent 9 months in a displaced persons camp, which was run by the Nyilas. And then in 1957, I came to the United States. I was 16 and a half years old. I spoke 3 languages. Russian, German, and Hungarian, but not English. So I went to an ESL program in East Los Angeles at Belmont High for 5 months. Then I decided that I needed to help financially my parents, which was just like any other refugees. They were struggling. My mother was working morning to night, taking care of old people, and my father was working in a cabinet shop from morning to night, and I felt that it was my responsibility to help. My first job was a shipping clerk. I made $1 an hour, and I thought I was so rich. Then I ended up going to work at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center as an EKG technician, and by this time I made $3 an hour, and I thought I was the richest girl in the United States. I have spent full-time working all my life and went to school at night. I have earned 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees in business, and I have a few certificates and degrees in art and psychology. I have 2 children, 2 grandchildren. I I am a medical administrator, but I'm retired, and I've been speaking for the museum for the past 10 or 15 years, and 10 years. And I also an event coordinator for a Jewish organization. Both of my parents had died. My mother died 35 years ago. My father died almost 50 years ago. I was married when I was 19 to a student. We were together for 10 years and we got divorced. I have, that's it. If you can ask me, why don't you just ask me any questions you want about anything, and I'll be very honest and to answer you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Eva, for sharing your story with us. We don't have any questions yet, but again, as a reminder for everyone, the questions, you can type them in the Q&A box, not the chat. So I just want to share, Eva, we have a lot of students who are saying thank you very much, and they really appreciated your story. We have a question.
Well, I know that I guess I might have cut it a little bit short because I wanted to give enough time for the answers and questions.
That's totally fine. So we do have a couple of questions. Did you ever remarry?
No, I didn't. When I got divorced, my one child was 2 years old, the other one was 5. And working in a Cedars-Sinai ER so much, I saw so many children who were abused by boyfriends and parents and stuff, and I was not going to put my kids through that. Plus, I felt that I was too busy raising 2 children, going to school and working full time. So I never remarried, but I was in a very long, complicated relationship afterwards.
Growing up, did you ever talk about this with your mother?
Very rarely. My parents were very, very damaged. We lost 96% of our family. My mother lost 5 siblings and her parents and cousins, and my stepfather lost 10 siblings and his parents and cousins, plus my birth father and many of that side of the family. So my parents were very damaged. They could not talk about it. On Yom Kippur, when my mother would light all the yahrzeit candles, she would sob, and at that time I would hear something about what happened. They had the concept that if they don't talk about it, it won't hurt me. I actually had to beg and plead to find out some of the information.
And actually, on that note, I wanted to share this with the audience. These are Eva's family members. Eva, this is your father on the left, right?
Correct, yes.
And this is
my
your aunt?
My mother's sister, yeah. And my mother's younger brother, they all were murdered.
So I just wanted to share this with everyone. What made you to share your story?
Pardon me?
What made you share your story, or what prompted you to start sharing?
Well, I've been sharing my story I belong to a Jewish renewal community, and I've been talking to them on every Yom HaShoah through the years. But for the museum, I met somebody who was working at the museum, Samantha. She I known from my community, and she invited me when you guys moved to the present location of the museum to help over there and set up, and she talked me into starting to talk about it. And also, that was one of the reasons. And the other reasons is because there is so much hatred and prejudice going on right now. There is so much injustice. I felt that if people are not educated and learn what hatred and bigotry can do, it can happen again. Plus, there are so many people who denying that it ever happened, the Holocaust. They say it is a Jewish propaganda. So I felt that as a survivor and a witness, I felt that it was my duty to do something about it. And this is the only thing I can do about it.
I'm really glad that you share your story today. So thank you for that. One of the audience members would like to know how have you been able to be so resilient despite the trauma that you went through?
Well, first of all, I married a young psychologist, so we spent a lot of time in therapy. And then after I got divorced, I continued being in therapy. I've been in and out of therapy for about 20 years. I actually been in therapy with Sarah Moscovich, who was specializing in the Holocaust survivors. I was with her for many years. And I have to tell you that being able to admit it and talking about it is also helped, because all of it, I understood a lot more about myself each time. Uh, but it is each time a little bit traumatic. It's also very medicinal to me because I understand more about myself. But basically, I started to talk about it openly and to everybody I can because of the denials and the bigotry that's going on. And right now, in this political situation we are in, I feel it's even more important than ever. Is that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much. Have you been back to Hungary?
Yes, the first time I went back to Hungary, it was when my son was 19 and my daughter was 17, because they decided that it's time for me to face my background and my back. They felt that it would help me psychologically and physically. And I went back then with my kids. And I remember the first time I stepped up a train, I was both excited and also scared, because that was the first time I went back. And that was still a height of the communistic era. So things were pretty weird. But the living family and friends who were in Hungary came to the train station and they said, "Welcome home, Eva." And I remember the first time tears running down my face. I visited all the places I was as a child, and with my kids, we were there for over a week. And I've been back about 3 or 4 other times since. And but I don't consider myself Hungarian. I consider myself American. And when I go there, it's like one foot is always ready to leave as soon as I get there.
Thank you for that. Was it hard or how did you adjust to American lifestyle?
Well, since I was such a unhappy, unpopular teenager and kid in Hungary, I spent a lot of time reading. And by the time we left Hungary, I knew all about the United States, the Constitution. I read everything I could, and I thought that this is going to be the America I always read about. And I thought that the day I stepped on American soil, which was September 11 in 1957, I thought that everything in the world is going to be just good from now on. Of course, adjustment was very difficult. I didn't speak the language. I had to go to school, and I didn't, then I realized financially how difficult it was for my family. So the adjustment was not easy at all. I basically was not among my own age people at all, because I either was at the ESL program, which was anybody who was foreigner went to school there, or I worked, and I went to school at night. So while I wanted to be an American more than anything else, and that was my goal, it was a few difficult years, but I was so excited about being American that I was willing to do anything for it.
Thank you for that answer. Did you talk about this with your friends growing up ever?
No, very rarely, very rarely. The only time if somebody said to me, like, "You must have been born during the Holocaust," and then I would say yes, and I said, Matter of fact, one of the other survivors from our group and I known each other. We were neighbors when we first got married, both of us, and we went out to dinners together and stuff, and we never discussed the fact that we both were Holocaust survivors. And about 10 years later, we met at the jacuzzi at the health club, and she said to me, by the way, aren't you a Holocaust survivor? And that's when we discovered that we are pretty much the same age and that we are both Holocaust survivors. And that's how I got involved to the Holocaust survivor group.
Was that Natalie Gold?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just didn't want to use names. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I realize it. I know that Natalie has actually shared that story with students, but I understand.
I mean, I remember we spent a lot of times together and we never discussed it. Never. It was like, like never happened.
Right. We have a few questions from students. They would like to know when you discovered that your stepfather was not your biological father and how you felt about that.
Well, it's a very important question and a very difficult one. I was 11 and a half and or 12 years old, something like that. And my mother had an argument with my stepfather's sister, and she decided to hurt my parents through me. So she made sure that I overheard her talking to somebody that my father no longer will have to love somebody else's brat because he's having his own little children. And my mother was pregnant with my second sister, and so I must have been about 12 years old. And my father, and he had already had one child, and they were talking about the second one. And I remember that's how I found out that he wasn't my real father. And I remember I had the key to the safe, and I opened the safe and found all the papers, and I found my adoption papers and my birth certificate, and they had different last names on it. I was born Adam, Eva, last name Adam, first name Eva, Adam and Eve. And I discovered that my father was Adam, not Rosenberg. And I found the adoption papers, and on that papers, it looked like my mother also wasn't my mother, because the Hungarians made her disown me as the wife of the first husband and adopt me as a wife of the second. And so it looked like my parents were not my parents at all. And I remember bringing all the papers to my mother. I mean, I felt so pain, such a physical and psychological and emotional pain, which I can't quite describe. And I remember bringing the paperwork for my mom, and she started to sob and tell me about it. And she told me that the reason they didn't tell me, because after the war, I was so sick that the doctors who took care of me felt I don't need to have one more trauma in my life. And then it just never came to the time to tell me. And it had actually caused a drift between my parents and me, because I was only 12 years old or so, and I couldn't quite understand that they had lied to me all those years. And then I also at that point started to question if they didn't like something about me, if they loved me or not. You know, everything was in a chaos. And it took a couple of years for me to realize that all the things they'd done, they did it in protection of me and loving me. But there were a couple of about 2 years, which was very painful, very difficult. And my closeness to my parents for a while, it stopped. And I remember I questioned everything I did after that, because I didn't know, I didn't look like my sisters, I didn't look like my parents. I felt like I don't belong to anyone. And even to this day, sometimes it comes up.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that it's an important part to your story, and I know that you know, I know it was really hard for you, but I'm glad that you talk about it. And also, you know, I know that that you really loved your stepfather as well. And I
I
know you've
do
just,
very much. I respect, he was one of the most decent, honest human being I have ever met. There was nobody better human being than he was. Uh, we were never looked alike. You know, my two sisters look like her. My two halves, him, I look like him. Then the three of us go someplace. Nobody think that we are sisters. So, but anyhow, no, I love my father very much, and I don't really have any emotions with my real father. I met the first cousin after my parents died. I found out I have a first cousin, and I met her and her family. And but to me, my father is my stepfather because he's the one who he raised me and I knew and carried me and took care of me as a kid. So he was the real father for me always.
do you know what do you think made it possible for people to join the underground and to help Jews hide or escape?
Well, I hope what it is that you know, the humanity and they see all the horrible things that was happening, and the same people who are working right now to help the underdogs, the same type of people. The person who was solely responsible for my mother's and my safety, his name was Hantos László. He was working on the underground, but he also had a wife who was Jewish, and he couldn't save his wife. The wife was taken away, and he couldn't save her. So I think he put an extra effort to try to save other Jews if he could. And I think that because there are good people all the time and everywhere, and there are people who are not into what's going on in the government. I'm just like right now, there are a lot of people who are opposing what's going on. And I'm just hoping that people realize that what a heroes those are, the ones who risk their own life to save other people, the save people who are basically nobody wants, because anti-Semitism is unfortunately growing everywhere. In Hungary, apparently, is as bad as it was before the war. And I know that in some other countries is as bad as that too.
I know that you mentioned this a little bit. This is a similar question, but would you say that you are mentally healed today?
Well, I think I am well, obviously I am a well-functioning human being. I work, I volunteer, I raise two kids, and thank God both of the kids are normal and good kids. I am very functional, but I think that part of I will never forget, and I can't even forgive for what happened. It is not, I can't, there is part of me which is very much in pain still. And I can tell you each time we talk about it, when I think of my family I lost and all the humanity which was lost, I think I am, because I spent 20 years or so in therapy, I think I am much better off than many of the other people who have never sought therapy, who never faced their own fears and never faced their own pains and their own prejudices and all that stuff. I think I am pretty functional, and I think I'm pretty okay. I am not sure if I ever will be 100%. I think that people who goes to trauma, especially the early years of their lives, I don't think that will ever be completely healed. Is that an answer which acceptable?
I think that's a very, very good answer, very fair answer. Have you ever faced anti-Semitism in the present day?
That I worked in a Jewish hospital for 40 years. I live a Melrose area, which used to be pretty Jewish area. I didn't experience any anti-Semitism here. I know that is existing, but I personally have not been a victim of it. But I have had a lot of people telling me that if they want to save me from being Jewish and they wanted me to convert to something else, because I'm pretty sure they had prejudice against Jews and they felt that I needed to, I just wanted to interpret it as they trying to save me instead of trying to admit that they don't like Jews, because that was easier for me to handle. But I personally did not experience any anti-Semitism myself since I live in the United States, but I see it happening. I also have to tell you that I never wear a Jewish star. I never wear a mezuzah, even though I'm a silversmith, because I used to have to wear the yellow star, and I will never, ever mark myself that way again. So I don't look like I am Jewish on the streets. I don't wear any garb which would make me look like it. I am not very religious, so I don't dress according to that. So I don't think I invite anti-Semitism, you know what I mean? But I know it's existing. I just never personally experienced it. And I also don't associate with people who are bigoted, if I can help it, and any kind of bigotry.
Thank you for that. When did you tell your kids and grandkids about your experiences?
Well, with my kids, I never sat down and told them the story like this, but they knew that there was something wrong because we went to my mother's house. So at a very early age, I told them that they were Jewish and why they don't have family and why don't they have aunts and uncles, cousins and all that stuff which other people kids have. I told them step by step, and they were pretty young age when I first discussed the bigotry issues with them. And then, but when they ever asked something, that's when I added more to it. My granddaughter knew about it, and she was born and raised in Paris when she was in elementary school, because apparently my daughter wrote and said to me, guess what she told in school, that her grandmother is a Holocaust survivor, and I didn't realize that she was so aware of it. My grandson, on the other hand, we didn't talk about it at all because his mother didn't let me. So it has only been the past couple of years that he would call and wants to know something about it. But both of my children and my granddaughter knew at an early age, and my daughter had come to listen to my speech at the museum. My granddaughter worked at the museum, heard me speak for many times, and my son has known about it, even though that he has never heard me speak. We've been trying to work out something that he would come to listen to me when I speak, but they knew for a long time. That's one of the reasons they wanted me to go back to Hungary with them, because they felt that would be maybe therapeutic for me to go back when it was all happening as a kid. But I never lied to them about it. I never hid it. I felt after my experience of being not told the truth, I always was honest with my kids, regardless what the question was. I still do. I feel that's better to be facing the truth one way or the other than trying to cover it up with honey.
What is your advice to America's youth today?
First of all, I hope anybody who is ready to vote is going to vote. Please, I beg you, and vote Democratic, and definitely. And also write to the Mitch and Trump to make sure that they don't replace the judge while it is still as this administration. I also want them to know that knowledge is the only thing nobody can take away from them, that they need to learn, and they need to learn as much as they can about history, the past, humanity, other cultures, so they won't have the fears and the hatred. Because I believe that many of the prejudice starts from fear of the unknown. And if they are familiarize themselves with other people's cultures, they won't be afraid, and they won't be hating, and they won't be bigoted. I also believe that family and community is very important, especially we found out in the past 6 months how important it is to at least talk on the phone, and that family and community is very important for you to respect. And also be proud of where you come from, proud of your background. You don't have to beat your chest about it, but you need to know that you belong to a very old and very important culture, which is over 5,000 years old, and that how much we had contributed to society. And you should be proud of it and not ashamed of it. And basically to do everything possible for peace in the world and peace around you, and stop all wars and prejudices. I am very, very scared of what's going on right now. Is that answered the question, or too much? Did I say too much again?
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. Eva, we always appreciate your honesty. Have you ever met a Holocaust denier? And
Yes.
how do you feel about them? Or about
I have heard saying, people I heard them talking about the fact that it was Jewish propaganda, that it didn't really happen that way, that we want to have people pity us or give us money for, all that stuff. And I always told them my history. I told them about the fact that I grew up without family because of the Holocaust. I every way we lost everything. The struggles my parents emotionally went through. I tried to talk to them and inform them without making them feel guilty, because if you make them feel guilty, they will just hate you more. So I've been trying to be more of an educator instead of a finger pointer. So that's the way I've been trying to do it.
That's a good answer. Thank you very much. Do you still speak the 3 languages that you spoke, or did
Well, I have to tell you that I was pretty stupid. I wanted to be an American so badly that I was not speaking any of the languages until I felt that I have a pretty good command of the English language. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And since I was forced to learn Russian in school, so it wasn't like something I loved. And German I learned while I was in a displaced persons camp for 9 months because I was in Austria. It wasn't something which if I didn't practice it, I knew it's gonna lose it. So I lost it pretty much. I still understand a few words, and I still, after a while, if I listen, I can understand some of the words. But I Russian and German, and pretty much lost it. With Hungarian, I only speak once or twice a week to people in Hungary. We have a Skype meeting, and basically just so keep me going with the Hungarian. But I still speak Hungarian, of course, and I read and write, but not as good. I really didn't want to identify myself as a Hungarian, period, and or German or Russian. You know what I mean? I wanted to blend in the United States. I really was very young, very idealistic, and very much wanted to be an American. That's all I wanted to be when I came here. But so I would like to tell the kids that anything they learn, keep on doing it. Don't let disappear from your mind, because that's a form of prejudice also. And so I don't want them to forget anything they learned on purpose, just like I did.
Do you know of any survivors who have a similar story to you?
Well, I know a lot of the survivors were also hidden, but I think every story is a little different because every experience is different, and also each person received the experience differently. You know what I mean? We all have been affected differently. So I know people who have a similar experience in the sense they were all hidden and saved, but that way, but they all had their own uniqueness.
Um, how do you think your children grew up being children of a Holocaust survivor as compared to other children, maybe their age, whose parents were not survivors?
Well, I always thought, and that just goes to show you how we tell ourselves things just because what we want to hear. I kept on telling myself that I had protected my children from the damage I went through. And they told me, when we sat through one night and talked about it, they told me that they knew my pain and my hurt, and they saw my parents' pain and hurt, and they feel that they were definitely affected by being children of the child survivors. They feel that they had totally affected and molded their life as well. I thought I was very good at protecting them from it, but they said that they felt it and they feel that they've been through it with me and with my family. They said that they definitely, and one of my, I have a rabbi who is a very wise man, and he said that 4 generations are always affected with the trauma each person has. So basically, it's totally normal that my children and my grandchildren were affected by it somehow.
Thank you, Eva. Do you know what happened to your biological father and how did you find
Yes,
out?
I do know. He escaped for my first birthday to give me this doll, and he apparently asked for permission to leave. They didn't give it to him, so he got on a train and came just to see me. And when he went back, they had put him into very, very hard labor, and he got sick. And when he no longer was able to do the hard labor they put him onto as a punishment, they make him dig his own ditch, shot him, and buried him alive. And we had an eyewitness. That's how we knew.
Thank you for sharing that. I know you mentioned this a little while ago, something similar, but what role does religion play in your life today?
I am part of a community called a Jewish renewal community called B'nai Horian. Uh, I met them when my mother died and I felt I had to go someplace to say Kaddish. And before that, I belonged to the theater arts temple, and it was lovely and a nice show, but I didn't feel my soul was involved in it. So I've been belonged to this temple, and after a while, I became their event coordinator, and I'm very involved. I am on the staff. I light Friday night candle every Friday night, even though that I am alone. I live alone because it's something meant Jewish to me from my parents. My mother lit Friday night candle every night, regardless, every Friday night. I celebrate the high holidays in my own way. Um, I think Judaism is very important to me. It's almost like an anchor to me. I know where I belong, but I am not religious in a sense of I don't always keep the Sabbath. I worked 40 years in a hospital. I couldn't tell my patients, don't get a heart attack today. It's my Sabbath. So I have I go to synagogue with my group on normal circumstances once a month at least, and I am the staff, and I do the high holidays with my group all the time. And right now I watch it on Zoom. Um, I think I am quite Jewish without being religious. I am very traditional, very spiritually Jewish. For never for 1 second have I ever denied it or wanted to be anything else. Um, have you been to my house, Michael? Well, I have a lot of Jewish things around me. As a silversmith, I made the Kiddush cup, I made the Havdalah candles, I had menorahs and stuff which I made. I very much identify as a Jew, and I also find a sort of a comfort in that I belong to a community, which I belong someplace. You know, I mean, it's very important to me. But I don't think it is, I don't know if we are the chosen people or we are any better than anybody else. I just feel that I belong to my own little community and it's important to me. And I find myself saying things, oh my God, and thank you, God. And I don't think of God as a white-bearded gentleman up there. It is, to me, it is basically the community is where I belong. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Did you ever encounter Nazis or Germans who tried to help you?
Well, the guy who didn't shoot us to kill at the Danube, even though that he had an alternative motive, but the fact that he did help us because he could have shot us with the rest of them. And that was the only Nazi person who I remember, and I remember seeing that. If I close my eyes, I can still even can see his face. But I never thought of anybody else who was admitted to be a Nazi who helped us. I mean, there must have been other people who helped us when we were moved from one place to the other and all that stuff, who had other, whom I had been identified themselves with the Nazis. I don't know. But that man I definitely met. And I remember his face and I remember his words and his actions. And both I'm grateful for not shooting us, and I am, of course, angry because he shot 400 people in front of me.
What do you think we can do to fight injustice, hatred, racism, and anti-Semitism today? Which I know you've touched on.
I already mentioned that. I think we should learn about different cultures. We should understand. We should not be afraid. I am against all violence, regardless what the reason is. I'm against all violence and all destruction. And I think that we should try to understand and educate, and because I think if people will see us that we are not such a bad people, but even if we are Jewish, then maybe they will change their opinion. I think we should tell them about our history if they're willing to listen. I think that we should try to discuss and find out why are they hating us or others, and see if we could change their opinions. I think education, I think being gentle and thoughtful and caring and communicating and compassionate is the things we need to do. What I'm doing is I spend at least 2-3 hours a day answering all these emails, trying to tell people to go to vote, trying to tell people to stop hating. I'm trying very hard to express myself and give them some ideas. I also donate some money to help some the right organizations. As a matter of fact, I need to know which organizations are good enough to donate money to, because some of them are just taking your money and not using it. But I think that education, compassion, and understanding is the main key of fighting any kind of bigotry and anti-Semitism.
Do you think the swastika will always be a tainted symbol?
Well, the swastika originally wasn't a tainted symbol. It was one of the cultures. The Nazis just took it. But in my mind, it's always will be. I mean, in my mind, when I see that, I don't go as far as back as where it's originally come from. I just know what it meant to me. It was the armband of the Nazi who was shooting us, the armband of the Nazi who took, you know what I mean? To me, it is always the swastika.
Okay, let's see. Throughout, do you remember what kinds of thoughts you were having throughout the Holocaust? I know you were young, but what sorts of thoughts do you remember going through your mind during this time?
Well, the beginning, I remember it was the continuous fear of sounds of anybody. I knew that if somebody could find, you know, even footsteps would scare me. Being always being frightened of the dark, being in the dark, not knowing what is outside. I remember being very petrified of all the crawling things and trying, you know, being the bugs and the rodents and stuff. The certain smells brings me still back to the Holocaust. I was in Belgium with my daughter, you know, 35 years ago, and we were in a room which smelled like had that kind of mildewy smell, like one of the places I was hidden. And she found me curled up in the corner with sucking my thumb. And then I remember telling her why I was thinking, what happened. But I didn't think about what was happening in the Holocaust because I didn't really know there was other kids who had different life. I mean, I was taken into hiding when I was 2. There was so little thing to remember before that. And until I was 4.5, my life was basically enclosures and you know, it was that kind of, so I don't know. Besides fear and hunger and my mother's voice, she was trying to keep us calm. I don't know if there was any kind of basic thinking going on. I remember that after the liberation, when I actually was outside and saw there were other lives than what I did, then when I started to wonder what went I through, you know, trying to understand. But I don't really have too much memories of my thought process during the Holocaust, as much as the fear where the next food coming from, the hunger, the pain, and then when I was sick, the whole discomfort of my body. I think I sort of blocked that part, and even with the therapy, there didn't too much of them come up. I was wondering, why are we doing this all the time? And my mother, of course, couldn't tell us. So, but no, I don't think that I was any kind of conscious thinking going on then.
What's like a couple more questions. Do you think this could happen again today?
The first time since I live in the United States, yes, I think it could. I think it could, and if we're not going to stop this political leadership, it may happen. And if it is not going to happen with us, it might happen to another group. And if it happens to one group, it could happen to anybody. So to me, it is, that's why when I found out the children being locked in cages, which was too much, just like the way I was locked in cages as a kid, all that kind of stuff, it just brought all that back to me. I think, unfortunately, it could happen again. And that's why we all have to do whatever we can to change the world into a better place.
Thank you for that. We have just a couple more questions. Do you have any scars? Oh, do you have any scars from the Holocaust?
Physical scars? No.
Yeah. So and physical, and I know you sort of talked about the mental scars, the things
Yeah.
that always.
I don't personally have any physical scars. When my mother was shot, I was not. She was shot, you know, on her arm. So I wasn't shot. I was too short because I was tied to her. I am petrified of water, petrified of enclosures. I don't lock doors unless I have to, because I always will have a fear that I need to escape. Any room we go into, the first thing I look for is an exit sign. I mean, I have a lot of psychological, marks on my brain and my soul, but nothing physical. All the other scars had happened afterwards. I can't hear you.
Yeah. Did you ever see anybody take their own lives?
Well, I worked in a hospital, and I seen a lot of people who tried to take their own lives, and they brought them into the emergency room, and I dealt with that. Uh, I did not see anybody actually doing it. I saw the afterwards, or I known about the afterwards. But I seen a lot of people who were brought into the hospital with self-inflicted wounds or taking drugs or all that stuff, and I had to work on them. But no, I never seen anybody personally try to do it.
And do you think, had this not happened, do you know where you would have been today? Do you think your family might have stayed in Hungary?
Well, my my stepfather's twin brother, the one who lived in Los Angeles, had escaped after the Holocaust because he was a gay man, and he knew that being gay in Hungary in 1945 and 6 was not a good thing to be. So he never came back to Hungary. And That's why we came to the United States. I mean, if all things being equal, if there wouldn't have been a Holocaust, my father and my mother would have stayed married. Their factory would have been working. When my grandfather died, the estate would have been divided. I mean, if everything would have been the way how it should have been, I probably should be living in Hungary, but who knows? I have, ever since I can consciously remember, I wanted to be out of Hungary and I wanted to be in the United States, ever since I can remember. And that is like since I was 4.5 years old. So um, I have never thought about myself being in the Hungary for the rest of my life, ever.
We're all glad that you're here. No,
And I am glad I'm here too.
the concluding question is, what is your favorite kind of chocolate now?
It's always dark chocolate because it's supposedly healthy. And I try to tell myself that just because I love chocolate, I'm being still healthy. No, but I like the taste of dark chocolate. Yeah. And I love fresh fruit. And I mean, I try to eat a very healthy diet, but the dark chocolate is one of my addictions.
Well, Eva, thank you so much. In fact, Eva, I think you can see the chat, but you can see that we have so many students. So much for sharing your story with us. We appreciate this, you taking your time today to do this, and we're all indebted to you for everything that you have done. And I know we're going to stay on the Zoom for a little bit so that the teacher can include her assignments today. So we'll stay on for just a little bit. Eva,
By the way, if you need me anytime, just holler.
Thank you so much, Eva. So, Eva, you are welcome to leave, or if you want to say any concluding remarks, you're welcome to do so. But
I just want the kids to know that I'm hoping for the time when I actually see them and talk to them and hug them. I really miss that contact, and then I'm hoping that what I heard from me was helpful somehow. And they, I'm trying to, I'm hoping that everything went the way how the teacher wanted me to.
Well, thank you very much, Eva. Okay, we have, for the student, the teacher is about to come on. So Eva, thank you again so much on behalf of everybody this morning.
You're very welcome anytime.
Miss Eva, my name is Rebecca Solomon. I'm one of the teachers at Robert F. Kennedy. And I just wanted to say thank you so much and Happy New Year. And we're deeply
Same to you.
Yes. The students are writing their own story. You used the word hero, right? And I think obviously the students are gonna speak about you in their minds as a hero, right? And so we're wondering if we can share, we're gonna create some stories and wondering if we can share those stories with you.
I would love that.
Yeah. Oh, you're getting a call. You're a busy lady.
That's okay, I'm not picking it up, I'll call them back.
So
Of course, by the way, if you need to get in touch with me about anything, as far as questioning any more questions or anything else, you're welcome to do so. Michael has my contact, and you're welcome to call me or talk to me.
We're really going to take advantage of that because we didn't get a chance to hug you. So we want to send you a lot of virtual hugs and thank yous, and also to share our stories with you, if that's okay, and to hear what you have to say.
I would love that.
And let me just say to students, please go to your Schoology, and there's a folder called Holocaust Survivor Talk Reflection. Please go into that, and by Friday, please share with us your reflections. For my period 3, you need to do that by tomorrow. Everybody else, you have till Friday. But I would do it as soon as possible. I want to hear what you remember, and then we can share some of those memories with Miss Eva as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Eva, thank you so much as always. To students, everybody for participating today. Thank you to my colleague Claudia, who is orchestrating the tech side from behind the screen. Thank you so much, and everybody stay safe, and let's hope we can give Eva a hug in person next year.